The World Cup final is on every screen. Bars are packed, strangers are hugging, a grown man is crying into his beer because 11 people he's never met just lost a ball game. And across town, another man closes his laptop, puts on his jacket, and goes for a walk. No anger, no bitterness, just a quiet exit. That second man is the one worth examining. Because when a man stops caring about the two things society insists he's supposed to care about most, elite sports and the modern dating market, that's not apathy. That's a cognitive pattern. And the psychology behind it is worth taking seriously. By the end of this video, you'll have a framework for opting out of both, without becoming the guy who's given up on everything. Most men never make that distinction. That's exactly why they stay stuck. Section 1. The dopamine architecture, how both traps are built. Here's what sports fandom and modern dating have in common. Neither one is designed to make you happy. Both are designed to keep you coming back. That's not an accident, it's architecture. The nucleus accumbens is the brain's reward processing center. It responds to the anticipation of a reward more than to the reward itself. What drives the strongest dopamine activity isn't winning. It's not knowing whether you'll win. Neuroscientists call this variable reward reinforcement. You probably know it as the reason slot machines are more addictive than vending machines. A vending machine gives you exactly what you paid for, every time. A slot machine might. That uncertainty is the mechanism. The not knowing is the hook. Sports fandom runs entirely on this system. You don't know if your team wins. You don't control the outcome. The result is structurally random from your perspective. And that randomness is precisely what makes the emotional investment feel so urgent. The nucleus accumbens doesn't distinguish between a match result and a pull of a lever. It just keeps tracking the anticipation, flooding you with dopamine during the build-up, and leaving you dry when the outcome lands. Now, layer in the University of Chicago research on dopamine receptor genes. Men with certain variants of the DRD4 gene, which affects how the brain processes dopamine, show statistically higher engagement with spectator sports. Their baseline dopamine thresholds are different, so they're drawn toward high-stimulation, unpredictable environments to feel the same satisfaction others get from lower-stakes activities. The point isn't that these men are weak. The point is that the trap was built to fit them specifically. The neurochemistry was already there. The sports industry just learned how to use it. Modern dating runs the same play. Swipe mechanics, intermittent matches, delayed responses. Every design element in a dating app mirrors the variable reward structure of a slot machine. The match notification hits the nucleus accumbens the same way a goal does. The anticipation before a first date fires the same dopamine cycle as the minutes before kickoff. The brain doesn't care about the context, it just tracks the loop. So what you actually have are two systems, one built around sports, one built around romantic pursuit, both running on the same neurological operating system. Call them what they are, the Parasocial Trap and the Transactional Trap. Two different interfaces, one underlying mechanism, unpredictable reward cycles that extract consistent emotional investment while guaranteeing nothing in return. The men who opt out of both aren't emotionally unavailable. They've identified the operating system, they've read the code underneath the experience, and they don't like what it says. Now, look at each trap individually, starting with the one that's been running the longest. Section 2. The Parasocial Trap. Outsourcing your identity to strangers. In 1956, two researchers named Horton and Wohl published a paper that nobody in the sports industry wanted to talk about. Their finding was straightforward. The human brain cannot fully distinguish between a real relationship and a one-sided media relationship. When you watch someone consistently, a television personality, a performer, an athlete, your brain begins processing that exposure the same way it processes genuine social bonds. It categorizes the connection as real. It allocates emotional resources accordingly. The term they coined for this was parasocial relationship, and it described something the entertainment industry had already been quietly exploiting for years before anyone named it. Sports fandom is parasocial investment at industrial scale. Branscombe and Wan built on this in 1992 with research that went further. Fans don't just follow teams, they fuse their self-concept to team performance. Their self-esteem moves in direct correlation with match results. A win doesn't just feel good, it registers as personal success. A loss doesn't just sting, it registers as personal failure. The team's identity becomes load-bearing architecture inside the fan's own sense of self. Which means the fan's psychological stability is now dependent on the performance of people who have never heard his name. Consider what that looks like in practice. Take a man, call him the ex-ultra fan. He was the kind of supporter who lived the full cycle, the pre-match rituals, the shirt, the specific seat in the bar, the week-long emotional hangover after a bad result. At some point, he started actually tracking it, a rough log of his mood against match outcomes, not as an experiment, just as self-awareness. The correlation was undeniable. His energy on Monday morning was directly determined by what 11 strangers had done with a ball on Saturday afternoon. His productivity, his social patience, his appetite, all of it downstream from a scoreline he had zero influence over. The asymmetry, when you see it clearly, is almost clinical in its strangeness. Ronaldo doesn't know he exists. The goalkeeper who made the error that cost the match didn't carry the loss home the same way. The players moved on to training Monday morning. The emotional weight of the defeat stayed entirely with the fan. He absorbed the cost. They cashed the paycheck. That's not a relationship. That's a one-way transfer. When this man pulled back, gradually, without a dramatic announcement, something shifted in the cognitive space that fandom had occupied. He redirected that same intensity, that tribal loyalty and emotional investment into building a business. The difference was immediate and structural. When the business won, the win was actually his. When it struggled, the struggle was actually his to solve. The feedback loop was reciprocal. The investment returned something. He wasn't cheering for someone else's competence anymore. He was developing his own. That's the reframe that matters here. Opting out of parasocial investment isn't a retreat from community or passion, it's pattern recognition. The brain finally running the numbers on what it's been spending versus what it's been getting back, and refusing to keep funding a deficit. The emotional bandwidth was always real. The capacity for loyalty and intensity was always genuine. The only variable was where it was aimed. And if the parasocial trap is dangerous because it disguises extraction as entertainment, the next system is more dangerous still because it disguises extraction as intimacy. Section 3. The Transactional Trap, when dating becomes a rigged casino. Modern dating apps weren't designed by psychologists trying to help people find connection. They were designed by engineers trying to maximize time on platform. That distinction matters more than most people realize because those two goals produce completely different products. One gets you a partner, the other gets you addicted to looking for one. The architecture is deliberate. Swipe mechanics create a physical action loop, the same repetitive motion, the same micro-anticipation before the card flips. Match notifications arrive on variable schedules because the engineers understood what behavioral psychologists had already proven. Irregular rewards produce stronger compulsive engagement than reliable ones. You don't know when the next match lands. That uncertainty keeps you opening the app. The nucleus accumbens doesn't evaluate the quality of a reward before it fires. It just tracks the possibility of one. Dating apps are built on that gap between possibility and delivery. But the neurological mechanism is only half the problem. The other half is the disguise. Sports fandom is openly transactional in a way that's at least honest. You buy the ticket, you watch the match, you get the experience. The exchange is visible. Modern dating markets operate differently. They wrap a fundamentally transactional dynamic inside the language of vulnerability, romance, and emotional authenticity. That packaging makes the cost much harder to see and much harder to name without sounding cynical. Take the burned-out dater. Not a bitter man, not a failed romantic, just a methodical one. After 2 years on the apps, he ran what he called emotional accounting. He mapped his actual inputs against his actual returns, the financial bleed of consistently initiating and paying, the emotional labor of managing his own disappointment while absorbing volatility from women who were themselves burned out by the same system. Against all of that, he mapped genuine reciprocity received. The ledger didn't balance. He wasn't in a series of developing relationships. He was functioning as an unappreciated ATM, providing stability, absorbing emotional weather, receiving nothing back but the continued possibility that things might change. When he walked away, he didn't write a manifesto about it. He just stopped. Some men take that logic further geographically. The passport bro phenomenon is often framed as escapism, but the more accurate read is simpler. These men are looking for more transparent dynamics. In certain cultural contexts, the transactional nature of the exchange is acknowledged rather than embedded inside emotional performance. That transparency at least lets a man read the actual contract before he signs it. That's something the domestic market currently doesn't offer. The core issue isn't that men object to investing in a partner. Most are genuinely willing to invest, emotionally, financially, in time and attention, when the terms are clear and the reciprocity is real. The objection is to a system that demands investment up front in the language of love and authenticity, while structurally blocking the kind of return that would make the investment rational. Walking away from that isn't failure. It's the response of a man who finally stopped confusing the packaging for the product. The practical question that follows: once a man identifies both traps and steps back from them, where does that recovered energy actually go? Section 4, The Awakening, what superior pattern recognition actually looks like. Pattern recognition is a cognitive skill. It's the same mental process that makes a good investor stop throwing money at a losing position or makes a good engineer identify a structural flaw before the build collapses. It requires a certain kind of emotional distance, not coldness, just the ability to see a system for what it is rather than what it promises to be. The men who opt out of both the parasocial trap and the transactional trap aren't exercising that skill against other people. They're exercising it against systems. That distinction is worth holding on to because the standard cultural narrative collapses these men into a single unflattering category: disengaged, the bitter, the emotionally unavailable. The psychology tells a different story. What actually happens is a reallocation, not a shutdown. The emotional and financial capital that was bleeding into one-sided systems doesn't disappear when a man steps back. It exists. It needs somewhere to go. The awakening is the moment a man stops letting rigged systems decide where it flows and starts making that decision himself. Consider Anton, 54 years old, an engineer by profession and by temperament, someone whose entire working life was built around diagnosing systems and improving their output. For most of his adult life, he kept those analytical instincts completely separate from how he spent his personal energy. He watched football religiously. He pursued relationships with the same effortful hope most men bring to it. Then, somewhere in his early 50s, he applied the same diagnostic lens to both. The audit didn't take long. The inputs were enormous. The reciprocal returns were not. He didn't quit people. He quit performing for systems that had no mechanism to perform back. He stopped watching football and stopped chasing connection that required him to shrink, wait, and absorb. The bandwidth he recovered was substantial, not just time, but cognitive and emotional load. He used it to build skills he'd deferred, physical conditioning he'd let slip, and a small network of relationships where both parties showed up consistently, without scorekeeping. The wins in that structure were actually his, not vicarious, not conditional on someone else's mood or performance. His. There's actually a name for what Anton built, and it comes from 40 years of psychological research. Self-determination theory, developed by Deci and Ryan, identifies 3 core psychological needs that produce genuine, lasting well-being: autonomy, competence, and genuine relatedness. Autonomy means acting from your own values, not external pressure. Competence means developing real skills and seeing real results from real effort. Genuine relatedness means connection where investment flows in both directions. Neither the parasocial trap nor the transactional trap satisfies any of these three. Sports fandom offers a simulation of relatedness. The tribal feeling is real, but the bond is one-directional. Modern dating markets undermine autonomy by punishing authenticity and rewarding performance over character. And neither system builds competence in anything that belongs to the man doing the investing. The shift toward alternative status games, personal mastery over tribal belonging, skill development over validation seeking, financial independence over romantic performance, isn't a lesser substitution, it's the upgrade. The brain's reward circuitry can attach to anything that produces genuine competence feedback. The only real difference is whether that feedback is real or simulated, reciprocal or extracted. So the man who stops caring about the World Cup and stops chasing the modern dating market isn't opting out of life. He's opting into a version of it where the math works, where effort produces outcomes he can measure, where his loyalty goes somewhere it's registered. Understanding the psychology is the diagnostic half. The practical question is what the framework actually looks like when you apply it. Section 5. The framework. Opting out. Without checking out. Opting out is not the same as shutting down. That distinction needs to be stated clearly because the two get conflated constantly. Emotional autonomy isn't emotional absence. The goal isn't to become someone who doesn't invest. It's to become someone who invests deliberately in systems that actually return something. The framework starts with an audit, not a philosophical exercise, a practical one. Track where your emotional and financial energy is actually going, not where you intend it to go, not where you think it goes, but where it demonstrably lands. Then, map that against genuine reciprocity received. What comes back? What's acknowledged, matched, returned? Whatever consistently takes without returning gets cut. Not dramatically, not with an announcement, just quietly defunded. That process alone will surface more clarity than most men expect, because the two traps we've examined share a particular design feature. They're built to feel like they're giving you something while the net flow runs the other direction. Spotting that asymmetry, naming it without flinching, is where the audit becomes useful. The second move is redesigning the status game. Every man runs a status system internally, some measure of what counts as a win, what registers as progress, what makes the day feel worth it. For most of their lives, many men have borrowed that framework from external sources: a team's table position, a match on an app, a woman's approval. The redesign means identifying one domain of personal mastery and making that the primary scoreboard. Fitness, a technical skill, a business, something where the feedback is direct, the progress is measurable, and the wins are unambiguously yours. Nobody else scores the goal. Nobody else gets the credit. The third move is rebuilding reciprocal bonds, not replacing community with isolation, but replacing one-sided investment with relationships that actually function bilaterally. Brotherhood, mentorship, family, connections where both people show up consistently and both people carry weight. The one-sided ones don't need to be ended with conflict. They can simply be allowed to expire through non-renewal. Stop funding them. See what remains when you do. The through line across all three moves is the same cognitive tool: selectivity. The same analytical lens that makes a good engineer or a disciplined investor effective also, when applied inward, stops a man from bleeding emotional capital into systems that were never designed to give it back. Conclusion. The system was never built to return what it takes from you. The man who walked away from the World Cup, who stopped chasing the apps, he's not broken, he's not bitter, he's not checked out, he's just the only one in the room who actually did the math. And when you stop funding systems that were never going to pay out, something shifts. The energy that was bleeding into other people's wins starts building your own. The loyalty that was wasted on strangers starts going somewhere it's actually registered. The version of you that was always capable of more, that man finally has somewhere real to go. Subscribe for more frameworks like this and drop a comment below. Where is your energy going now?